Your morning coffee costs more today than it did last year. Not because the beans got rarer, not because your barista got greedier, but because someone, somewhere, printed money you'll never see, and you're paying for it. This isn't a tax bill. There's no line item, no receipt, no vote. But you fund it every single day. They call it inflation. That's the polite word. The accurate word is transfer. Right now, in 2024, the average American has lost roughly 20% of their purchasing power since 2020. That's not a recession stat. That's just Tuesday. You make the same salary. The number in your bank account looks fine, but the grocery bill doubled. Rent climbed. A decent used car now costs what a new one did 5 years ago. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. This wasn't an accident. Inflation isn't some natural disaster that just happens, like a hurricane or a drought. It's a policy, a deliberate one. Governments and central banks create it on purpose because it solves a problem they have, not a problem you have, a problem they have. So let's talk about the invisible tax, the one you pay every time you swipe your card and never once get to vote on. Here's how it works. Governments spend money, a lot of it, more than they collect in taxes. In the U.S. alone, the federal government spent over $6 trillion in 2023. They brought in about $4.4 trillion. That's a $1.6 trillion gap. So what do? They borrow. They issue bonds. And when borrowing gets expensive or uncomfortable, they do something cleverer. They print. Well, not literally. The Treasury doesn't fire up the printing press in a basement somewhere. Instead, the Federal Reserve creates new money digitally, adds zeros to a balance sheet, and uses it to buy government debt. More dollars enter circulation, same amount of goods and services, and suddenly each dollar buys less. That's inflation. But here's the magic trick. The government gets to spend those new dollars first, at yesterday's prices. They build roads, fund programs, pay salaries, all before the price of anything adjusts. By the time that new money trickles down to you, the worker, the saver, the renter, prices have already moved. You're late to the party, and you're paying the cover charge. Economists have a term for this. They call it the Cantillon effect, named after an 18th century French banker who noticed that whoever gets the new money first benefits. Everyone else, they subsidize it. You're everyone else. Let's do the uncomfortable math. Say you had $50,000 in savings in 2020. You didn't touch it, just let it sit. Responsible, right? By 2024, inflation averaged around 5% per year. Compounded, that's over 20%. Your $50,000 can now buy what $40,000 bought 4 years ago. You lost $10,000. Not to a thief, not to bad investments, to monetary policy. And no one sent you a letter. No one asked permission. Meanwhile, the government's debt, $31 trillion in 2023, got 20% easier to pay back because they owe you dollars, and dollars just got cheaper. See the transfer? You saved. They printed. You lost purchasing power. They reduced their debt burden. It's elegant, brutal, and completely legal. Now here's what they'll tell you. They'll say inflation is necessary, that it encourages spending, stimulates growth, keeps the economy from seizing up, that a little inflation is healthy. And maybe there's some truth in that. At 2%, at stable, predictable levels. But we haven't had that. We had stimulus packages that injected $5 trillion into the economy in 2 years. We had supply chain chaos, sure, but we also had monetary supply growth that hadn't been seen since the 1970s. And when prices exploded, the message was, this is temporary, transitory, just wait. It wasn't. The Fed raised interest rates, Inflation cooled, but prices didn't come back down. They just stopped climbing as fast. That's the trick. Inflation measures the rate of increase. When it drops from 9% to 3%, headlines celebrate, but your rent didn't unincrease. Your grocery bill didn't reset. The wealth transfer already happened. So who wins in this system? People who own assets, real estate, stocks, commodities, anything that inflates with the money supply. The rich, in other words, get richer, not because they're smarter, because they own things that rise when money gets cheaper. People who live paycheck to paycheck, people who save in cash, they get crushed. It's regressive, the exact opposite of a progressive tax. The people with the least cushion absorb the most damage. And it's invisible. You can't protest it. You can't vote it out. You just watch your rent climb and your savings shrink and wonder why everything feels harder than it used to. This is why just save money isn't the advice it used to be. Savings accounts pay 4% interest if you're lucky. Inflation runs hotter. You're treading water while the tide pulls you backward. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed, just not for you. So here's the question nobody wants to ask. What happens when people figure this out? Not economists, not policy wonks, regular people, the ones who keep showing up, keep working, keep saving, only to realize the game is rigged at the molecular level. What happens when trust in the currency itself starts to crack? Maybe nothing. Maybe we all just accept it, adapt, buy assets, play the game. Or maybe we're watching the slow unraveling of a system that only works when most people don't understand it. You're paying a tax right now as you watch this. No bill, no vote, no escape. And the only real question is, how long until enough people notice?